You're listening to the Scaling Culture Podcast, where we sit down with thought leaders who share their experiences building incredible workplace cultures. Matt Symes is the CEO of Symplicity Designs, the president of United Sign and Trimline, and has equity interests in sectors as diverse as online education, geospatial scanning, biotech, and real estate. Over the last 8 years, Matt has worked with more than 400 organizations leading transformational changes in workplace culture. And most recently, during the COVID-19 pandemic, Symplicity and Matt emerged as a common voice for more than 2,000 leaders. Today, Matt talks about the change management process and how to effectively bring teams through large-scale organizational change.
Welcome to another episode of the Scaling Culture Podcast. I got a big smile on my face as I'm looking at Matt Symes. Matt, welcome.
Thank you, sir. How you doing?
I'm doing really good. So Matt, look, before we get started, I wanted to talk quickly and I guess point out, we're both an entrepreneurs organization. I think that's how we know each other originally. And when this pandemic hit, I haven't seen, you talk about pivoting and different things that businesses have done. What you guys did is, it seems from what I saw, you stopped everything and said, how do we help companies? Like, we are stopping what we're doing and we are focusing on helping companies. And geez, you guys have done that. Not only a phenomenal job, but you did it in every way. It wasn't just help companies. It's one thing. It was if you needed help with cash, if you needed help with strategy, execution, it was just really nice to see, a company as well versus you guys taking that, putting that much effort and being, I'll call it selfless in a time of chaos to say, hey, we are going to be spending lots of effort on this stuff. So look, thanks so much from myself and obviously other entrepreneurs. You've had probably thousands of people get into your webinars now. And so thanks for that.
Appreciate that, Ron. It was a moment where there was a lot of uncertainty. And if there's one thing that we've done over the last decade is we've helped companies navigate uncertainty. Now, normally the market's not in complete chaos. Normally it's the company in chaos. But when both the market and the company are in chaos, it creates an environment of stress. And so you need to bring that way down if you're going to get any sort of creative solution. And so we just tried to provide a guiding voice for people to say, we've been through variations of this before. Let's slow it down. Let's figure out why we exist and let's get through this. And let's get through this together. The only thing I'll say is most economies are built on the backs of small and micro businesses who really can't afford the type of help that the richer organizations can get. And so that's why we just said, this is ridiculous. Throw the paywall away. Let's help who can be helped and let's go.
And Matt, can you give just an overview quickly of what Symplicity does and like the why behind the company? I know you have a powerful one.
Yeah. I mean, we started our organization about a decade ago to make the world a better place, one organization at a time. And that makes some people roll their eyes, and I really don't care. That's not for them. It's for us. We select who we work with on that. We want to sustainably build a better future for this region and for this world. Business doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. It can be much more to many people. And that's what we've tried to do.
Yeah, great. Love it, Matt. And, it's interesting. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into change management. And when we were talking about this topic, you were the first guy that came to mind. I know that is a big piece of what you guys do. You enter an organization, and I'm speaking for you, you kind of triage, do your thing, figure out where they need to get to. So I wanted to dive deep into that. You cool?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
So before you take on a client and before you get into someone's reached out and said, look, we have a problem here. What are the things that you need to know about this customer before you go in, before you even take it on? You must have barriers of entry.
Yeah. So the first thing is does the leader have a growth mindset?
Right.
And
sorry, Matt, how do you find that out? How do you know if I have?
Well, you just have to ask a few questions. The first thing, like, are they talking about people being good or not good at things? Are they talking about? Do they come at it with a mindset of good and could be better, and an improvement mindset, or do they come at it with a fixed mindset of, you just are this way, and you can spot it by just asking them about the last couple of problems. And if they describe it through people who were unable to perform, it's going to be pretty hard to help that leader.
So if they've deflected, if they've said, not my problem, the organization can't perform.
Yeah.
And what's the right answer?
Well, the right answer is we've got this hurdle we just can't seem to get over.
It's
and
right?
It's a we, and it's also a blaming of the ways we're doing things, not the who is doing things.
Right. Yeah.
So, and that's not, it's a tough mindset to get to, because we're programmed as humans to try and find somebody responsible for the problem. And we want to hold people accountable to the result. Well, that's all well and good, but it's not going to help you in improvement.
Yeah, of course. So once you get there, so I'm a customer, you say, okay, Ron seems to have a growth mindset. How do you enter an organization? What's the process look like? How do you start to build trust? Because it can't just be you're going to deal with me. Do you have an icebreaker? What does that look like when you come in?
I mean, there's a thousand ways to enter an organization, but the first one is to authentically listen to what they're trying to create. Right? I mean, there's a total, if you're trying to create a very profitable $1.5 million business that serves a distinct market in a region, that's totally different than trying to build a $25 million company that serves multi-value streams, multi-businesses. So it can't be what I want for the organization. It has to be what they want. And the only way you get there is by having them describe the future state they want to have. And
what is the ideal future? What are you looking for? Right?
That's it.
Do you have to agree with that or not? You're like, okay, great, let's go.
Well, I don't have to agree with it, but I have to be that shock-proof shit detector for them that says, that's nice, but we are ages away from that, right? We're miles away from that. Or I have to ask them, do you really want that? Do you want that because someone else wants it for you, or do you really want it?
Why do you want this?
Right. I mean, Ron, you know that the difference between a $1.5 million business and a $5 million business and then a $100 million business. Those are totally different problems, right? And most entrepreneurs we work with haven't defined success for them. And the result of that is that they've created chaotic and often diverging visions of their business. So, you want to dive deep on change, you better first dive deep on what you're trying to build as an individual and get clear on that. And then how your organization is going to enable that. Where do you want to take that organization?
Yeah, I love that. And so once you get through that sounds like a really in-depth first step. Yeah. What are some initial barriers? So we get through that. What are the barriers that you see as you go in? So now I've said, look, the future looks like this. This is what I want. Help me get there. Boom, come on in.
Yeah. So then we get with the team and we solidify that this is the future. This is where we're headed. And then we have a very robust conversation around what's the gap between where we want to go and where we are.
When you say team, your team, their team?
Both.
Okay.
You need the leadership team in, but I'll take away what they want to do. And, we've worked with over 400 organizations in the last decade. If something isn't passing the sniff test, we're going to have an honest conversation about that. Yeah. But let's say the vision is you can achieve most things. So let's say we can get there. Okay, great. So what's the gap? Now we're starting to chart the journey, because if you want to lead change, the most important thing is to create a gap between where you want to go and where you are.
Create a gap, or you mean identify? Like here's
create the entirety of the gap. What is the journey? How far are we from this? Right? And it's always way further than people want to give credit to it. But forget it. It doesn't really matter how far the journey is. We just got to agree on the gap and the sequence of the things we need to fix.
And Matt, when you say agree on the gap, what is that like? Visually walk me through that. Are you in my organization facilitating the conversation? You do it with your team, come back and present. What's it look like?
No, we got to do it together, because we got to co-create and co-learn. We got to trip over the truth. So all great leading change is a discovery exercise. Not only where we want to go. See, if I present it to you, you're going to tell me why I'm a donkey.
Right.
If I build it with you, we're going to agree.
Right. That's is that part of the change management process? This is part of the buy-ins. This is ground zero, right?
Buying in from the leadership perspective. You're doing this over and over again, right? People tend to want to be the smartest person in the room and show you the answer. Yep. And that doesn't really matter when you're leading change with teams. If you know it, but no one else knows it, great. That and $2 to get you a cup of coffee. Not going anywhere.
And so you get there. So we've as a group, We've identified what the gap is. We've gone through that. We both agree, your organization, mine. And let's say, go back to my security business. You have multiple layers. It's national, a lot of frontline staff. That's probably one of the most complex organizations to go into to create change. What's next?
So strategically, we've determined the gap and we've sequenced the fixes, at least as best. There's a whole lot of tools you can use to get better, but you've sequenced the fixes. Okay. So now I'm going to get
the first hurdle. The first priority is this, and then second, and then
exactly. Third. Yeah. And that's a scoping issue. Pretty consistently, people scope things too big. They make them too ambiguous. So the thing is to really cut it down into chunks. So I need to take the macro gap of where I want to be in the long term and get it down to a very solid 90-day plan of what I'm going to do in the business, on the business, and from a resource standpoint. And I generally hate the way people talk about in and on the business. Mm-hmm. People tell me when they're doing sales, they're working on the business. They tell me when they're doing strategy, they're working on the business. Mm-hmm. No, you're not. When you're doing sales, you're working in the business, selling more, right? If you're going to change form, fit, or function of an area of your business, you're working on the business. So if I'm going to change the sales process, I'm working on the business.
Right.
When you're working on the business, think of it as a home renovation.
Yeah.
Between 1% and 99% done, it's all cost and no value.
Right.
It's just an unfinished project. So on the business, you can only really do one of them every 90 days. But you still have to move the organization. So there's a whole bunch of Band-Aids you're going to put on it, and there's a whole bunch of resources you're going to lean on to hold some stuff together. Right? Mm-hmm. That's what it is to run a company. But we're going to say, hey, I'm going to hold this together while I systemically fix this area. Sales process, marketing process, HR process, something.
So that just means I'm going to continue with my sales. That can't stop. But as we do that, we're spending time changing the process.
I'm going to change this process over here so that it functions faster, better with less resources.
So then what, Matt? So let's just say we're changing the sales process. We've got salespeople across the country. We've, identified what the gaps are. We've identified we broke it down to the micro levels. And then how do we push this out to the salespeople themselves?
Well, the salespeople better be building that with you. Again, so now it's the next layer, right? The leadership layer determines sales as the constraint. Mm-hmm. The new sales process now that we're going to build needs to be built by the people selling.
Right.
Again, we're back to, you got to do it with them, not to them.
Mm-hmm. And how do you get them the message that, because, the old saying, which I hate, if it's not broken, don't fix it. I'm the salesperson. I think our process is fine. I actually helped build the last one. How dare you come in and tell me that we need to fix it? How do you get that message? How do you get buy-in at that level?
Yeah, I mean, this is at the core of leading change is creating a sense of urgency. Right. I gotta get people moving. So there's a whole bunch of ways. Again, you're setting a gap, but you're setting a gap at a new level, right? And so, a really easy way to do this is to look at the variance between your reps. You got 20 reps across the country. My guess is you got 2 or 3 that are rocking it. You got 2 or 3 that, are not thriving. You got a bunch in the middle, but you got high variance. Mm-hmm. Now, start with, you don't need to show the names. Just start with the variance in high performer to low performer and go, how amazing would this organization be if everyone used the best practice everywhere and we're all performing at the top level?
So you're using data to convince me, hey, Ron, look, here's the data,
Yeah. So you use data. Data has to be the backup, but data won't get you anywhere. Vern Harnish is fond of saying, people aren't logical, they're psychological.
Right.
So I've got to connect them to a story that helps them understand. People don't move because you show them a 30-page data set.
Right.
But the story you create to create the sense of urgency has to be backed up by the data. Because otherwise if you want positive change, that is, right? There's a lot of people who use the tenets of leading change to do horrific things, right? All of the most horrific things in human history have been built on a fraction of truth. And then we've created a story and I mean, if you look at any of those instances, you can get real dark in this one if you want. Leading change works for the positive and for the negative. Right.
And so now we've identified that. I've been involved in the process. We need to execute. This is there's got to be one of the biggest challenges. Bottlenecks you're going to hit bottlenecks, personalities. How do you start the execution process?
Well,
what's the fastest way to scale this process?
Yeah, so first in the execution, when you're making change, it's always good to use a word like a pilot or a skunk works team, and we're going to go try something.
Right.
So it lowers the barrier. And the other thing is
the
risk. And the way that you bring the risk down too is you never doing a cross change. If I've got 20 sales reps, I'm going to pilot the new change with 3 or 4 of them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have all 20 build it, but 3 or 4 are going to execute on it. And what are we going to learn as soon as we go to execute on the theory of the new way?
Right.
We're going to learn why it's wrong.
Yeah.
Right. So if you do it with all 20, you're going to have 20 people saying this doesn't work, throw it away. I'm going to go back to my old habits. If you do it with 3 or 4, you pilot and you say, we're going to learn. So now what happens is you've created the environment where learning is prioritized over the immediate execution, which allows you to execute at a higher level. It allows 3 or 4 people who are really, by the way, I go with the coalition of the willing here, right? I go with the people who want to change, not with the people who are forced to.
Yeah, those who are running the pilot are saying, look, this needs to change, right? Yeah. I bought in, right?
Exactly. I want to do it. And then you let their early stories and early results guide the rest of the change through the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And, once you have 80% of the people on board, I now change the rules.
Right.
Right. But people, senior leaders get 20% on board and go, okay, that change is over. I'm going to the next one. No, it's not. And that's a huge problem for most senior leaders. Because what do you want to do? You're looking at the next squirrel.
Yeah.
Right. You want to fix the next problem. We don't fully finish this one.
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
So once the pilot, let's just say it's got legs, we figured this out, it's working, boom, we need to move across the organization. Now we have to go vertical, horizontal, whatever the word is.
Sure. Yeah. At this point, you're going bit by bit. Right. So here's what I do. I take the new process and the way it's working, and I bring it to a new area, and we flow the process out, and they tell me why it won't work for them.
There's going to be new challenges, new area, new people, new customers, new challenges.
Sure. And what you find out is they're like, it'll never work for me because of some sort of unique part that you just put up there. And then if you force them to do it, that's what they'll stick to. If you bring the new process and say, can you make this better for me? And they get their mitts on it. And they go, well, I would do this a little differently and this a little differently. What you have now is a better process for the second group.
Mm-hmm.
And the first group learns from it and off you go.
Right.
Right. And so what you're doing is you're not just transferring the best practice, you're actually making the best practice better as you move it across the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's systematic. It's not, you can't do this in an ad hoc way. Hey, Bob's doing a good job selling. Let's get Bob to teach everybody.
So this converts the skeptics to I'm not a skeptic. You're asking for my help now.
That's
change
correct.
This and make it better, right?
Yeah. And you're always going to deal with the no-nos. That's fine. Don't spend your time with them. Right? Like anybody who's against a change we're working with, they get all of my smiles and none of my time.
I love that. All my smiles, none of my time. Yeah.
Right. Because where do you want your energy to go? I want my energy to go with people who are excited about the change and helping to remove roadblocks for them. I don't want to spend my time in debate with people. And what am I doing when I spend my time in debate? I'm telling everybody else this guy has a point.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I think I'm convincing people. I'm not. I'm actually giving weight to his argument.
Yeah. And so there's an accountability. How do you make sure? What are some of the keys to make sure this is going to be smooth now? I see this trend. I see where it's going. What are some of the key things to make sure that this is executed? People are accountable for the process, because eventually, maybe not everybody touched it, but we're going. This is the new process, a new sales process.
So the key, if you're familiar with good daily management, it's all around a process that you go use, you'll learn from. So do I have a way to get together every day or every week to make that process better? Mm-hmm. And if I don't, I won't get buy into that process. So what I need, the great organizations are working in the business, executing on that new sales process, and they're spending 15 minutes a day talking about why it's not working.
That is a topic. That's an agenda.
That's an agenda item. And you're saying, hey, I go out and I plan to make 38 calls today. I plan to have 6 meaningful conversations. I plan to convert X dollars. Great. Come back at the end of the day. What prevented you from having a perfect day? And they will go ahead.
Well, do you drive accountability? So do you try to use the same data metrics? Everyone's making 10 calls. Come back to us after those 10. Is that helpful in the accountability piece? And then tell us what's not working.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Most people use metrics to prove. We use metrics to improve. If you use metrics to prove, I won't tell you the real score. Right? If you're going to use them to beat me, I'm going to hide from you. So, you know, how are you? This sort of hold people accountable. I believe people hold themselves accountable if you put the right system in place
and process the right way you're providing it, you know.
Exactly. You state intention, right? So you get people to state intention of what they plan to do that day, and then you help understand what got in their way. And in understanding what got in their way, you have a data set by which you can talk about removing roadblocks. Right? I'll give you a prime example of this. We're working with a physiotherapy outfit. They had 28 therapists. Okay. And before we went in and looked at how they could get more out of their time, right? They were working at about 50% utilization. So, you know, in a service business, if you're only 50% value add work and the other 50% is running around doing stuff, that company's not making much money.
No.
Right? So we go in there and we get through some of the stuff in the process and get rid of some of the waste. And they're clocking along at 72%, which is a nice bump. And before this, they had complained about their computers. You know, offhand, it's slow, yada, yada. And of course, what does the owner think when you're complaining about your computer? Oh, God, another expense. Or you're thinking, stop whining. Like, let's get moving on. Well, they started realizing the computers were about 4 years old. It took a half hour to boot up. I'm making $100 an hour. I got 24 therapists losing a half hour every day. Now, when I quantify this on what's getting in my way, how much are they losing every day? They're losing $1,200 of billable time a day waiting for the computer. Well, what do you think that business owner is now doing about the computer complaint?
Right.
I can tell you what they did. BDC loan the next day, bought the computers, got the half hour back. How long do you think it took her to pay that back? Not long. Not long.
And how do you build a culture, Matt? Because two things. Once you guys leave, you're probably left, and I assume you want to sustain change there, right? So let's start there. How do you leave my organization and hopefully allow me to run point next time, or the organization, not me, I should say. But how do I keep and sustain a culture of change?
It's a system. And so our job is to leave you so that you can do everything we've done between 18 and 36 months, right? And it's a system, there's a way in which you make strategic choice. That choice should be around understanding the gap in the organization you're going to fix. Then I need to fix it. There's a bunch of good toolkits. You've heard all the buzzword crap, but let's call it advanced problem solving, right? So there are problem solving tools that you should probably have, and you need 2 or 3 people in your organization that are trained to facilitate improvement.
So keeping a trained facilitator, right?
We need to train someone.
Right.
This journey starts with you being able to make good choice and you being able to execute improvements once you've made the choice. In order to do that, you need a system for making choice, and you need people who can facilitate improvement. Right.
And then when you say facilitate, you're talking like, sorry, not the facilitator, I understand, but then you also, for certain things, you'll need I think you talked about this before, but change agents. But those must change because some are passionate about this, not passionate about that. That must change. How do you identify
Here's
that?
the thing. You've probably, I mean, no doubt you've heard of Lean Six Sigma, and they do advanced stats and bore you to tears, and the zealots ruin every religion. But the good ones understand how to use theory of constraints, the good principles of lean, and good statistical variation to make sure you fix the right problems. So you need to train those people. Now, here's the thing. You never want the department of continuous improvement because it takes an inordinate amount of energy to facilitate and lead change. So what you want is to create that as part of your development. So any great young future leader in the organization, I want to take them out and work on the business for 2 years. I want them to facilitate and work on. Guess what I'm going to get when I get that? I'm going to get a series of improvements done. somewhere between 4 and 6 improvements done a year that are going to bring a return to the business.
Yep.
And guess what I'm going to find out? Can they lead? Because if you're facilitating improvement, what do you need to do? You need to lead without authority.
Yeah.
Right. So you make it a training ground. So instead of taking a young talent and promoting them to manager and watching them fail, you actually move them to improvement and you get a look at whether they can do it or not. If they can't do it, no skin, you get some improvements, you send them back to being a salesperson and off you go. So if you want to bake this in, you bake it into the organization as part of the development of anybody coming through.
Interesting. So, and when you say development, are you talking like onboarding or not?
So I love using this in onboarding because they see stuff you don't. So what I love is in the first 3 to 6 months, I love talking to an individual saying, what do you see around here that we do that is just crazy?
Was it Toyota that used to have this red box? They would hire a manager, they're in the facility, and they put them in that red box. And this is, me storytelling, I'm sure, but I think they were there for a week. And if they couldn't find 5 problems, they were gone or something like that.
Well, so every new manager that gets hired at Toyota to move into a management role has got to go to their highest performing facility in Tokyo and has got to identify 100+ improvements in their best place over the course of 2 days.
I love it.
And if you can't, then what they know is you don't have that improvement mindset. Right? Because listen, if you're going to live in a world of continuous improvement, you're going to have to see creative abrasion as a good thing.
Yeah.
What that means is you have to live with the idea that I'm as good as I am today, and that's okay. And every part of everything I'm doing is being done better by someone somewhere. Most people live in good or bad. They can't live in good and could be better. Right? That was Steve Jobs was just amazing at that. That was his ethos. Right, which is why even the rounded corners on the laptop, and why like when you took off the back plate that no one could take off, it was beautifully designed because he was continuously pushing and striving for 1% better.
But Steve also, and I really took a page out of his book where he would go to the bottleneck, he would go to the problem and sit there himself. And I think it sends the right message to your team. But he would really I'm sure he's quite OCD about it. He would just focus on that problem, really think about it, and then essentially implement change from there.
Well, I mean, you bring up an important point on leadership. You, with all due respect, you may know where the constraint is in the organization, but you don't know how to fix it, even if you've worked in there. That's the classic problem with entrepreneurs. They've done every job in the organization, so they think they know every job better than everybody. Yeah. Well, you need to go there. And here's what you're going to, as a senior leader, you are going to show what's important to the organization by where you put your time, not by what you say. That's a critical difference, where you put your time. Right? So where are you going?
And Matt, I'm going to rewind a little bit, but as you're going into organizations, and especially you work with some larger companies, they have leaders that even through that process don't buy in. They're just like, look, I've been here for 15 years, forget it. How do you deal with those that are just stuck? They're just stuck. They're not moving. Doesn't matter. We tried stories, backed up with data. We tried to get help. We tried to get them involved. They are just fighting and screaming. Are they gone? What
a classic no-no, right? And I talked on it a bit earlier. Once you get to 80% buy-in, you then get to change the rules of how we're going to operate here. And once you start to change the rules, what you get is you get that extra 20%, and 10% go, okay, I get it. The rules have changed. The other 10% are going, I'm never going to change. Well, that's when you start your 3 conversations, right? The first one is, this is how we do it here. I think you should, I think you should figure it out. The second one is
quickly.
Well, yeah, quickly. The second one is, do you know it's easier to get a job while you still have one?
So that's a tough conversation.
Right. And then the third one is, you still haven't figured it out.
Right.
Right. And that, but people have that conversation too early. See, here's the thing. You've seen the law of diffusion of innovation, or, the histogram that shows change and what percent change with the innovators and the early adopters and the early majority and the late majority. Here's the thing. I can't tell the difference between a no-no and an early majority in the first days of a change. And I really can't tell the difference between a late adopter and a no-no or a laggard. in the early days. And the mistake I make is going hard at a late adopter.
Right.
And turning them into a no-no. Right. And the reason why I'll say this is so important is your late adopters are the ones that hold your organization together. They're holding the framework of what works together.
Right.
So don't alienate them. They're going to be the torchbearer.
And so how do you figure that out? How do you, keep going, Matt?
It's day by day, right? So here's the thing. You figure it out as you start to move the change across the organization and people start to adopt it, right? The innovators will do it because they saw a squirrel and they want a new one, right? The early adopters and the early majority are going to look at it and go, seems like a good idea. I like that. The late adopters need to see proof. They don't care about your stories. They need to see that X equals Y and that so you can get the first 50% on stories and a little data. The last bit, they're not moving till it works. So if you haven't gotten more than 80% on board, you got to ask yourself as a leader, is this really working? Like, do I have the results to justify? Sure, I can change this, but is the change working? Is it giving me the results? And if it is, you won't have a problem getting that last 20, 30% on board.
It's interesting. And I've been to your seminars, which were awesome, and had the pleasure of also hearing your father speak, Merv. And one of the things that always stuck out to me is, and this was obviously deeply ingrained into Symplicity's culture, is we debrief everything. We even if we had the best day ever, the message I got was, we're going to find something that we can improve.
Yep.
I don't care if it's as simple as the setup, where the speaker were, how we set up the tables. There's something that we need, kind of that Toyota methodology. Tell me more about that.
Well, so here's the danger. If you only look at good and bad, then a day needs to be good or bad. But at the end of the day, there is no possibility, at least I haven't run into a perfect day yet. I've run into lots of days that have felt great and we've gotten the result. Right. But I have not run into a perfect day. And so how can you learn? How do you infuse learning in your organization? You talk openly about the things that don't go well.
Yep.
Now, there's a balance there because the human brain remembers negative far more than positive. So you have to balance it out with a discussion of what went well.
Right.
You can't just talk about the stuff that you didn't like. Right. And the other thing to remember is don't solve problems in that meeting. You're just identifying gaps. And so here's the thing, Ron, either you're going to talk about it at the end of the day or you're going to go home and talk to someone else about it.
Why not solve it there? Why not say, well, okay, the problem was we should have tested the equipment in advance.
Yep.
And so the simple fix is, okay, add that to the list, check in advance. Why not
so
take it?
If it is that simple, sure. If it's a 2-second conversation and everyone agrees,
okay,
then do it. But that is rare, by the way.
Right.
It is rare. Normally someone goes, well, what about this or what about that? And as soon as you get into more than, like with tired brains at 4:30 or 5:30,
right.
That's not the time to solve complex problems.
Interesting.
It's the time to identify them.
Right. Yeah, I like that. Now that brings into context. Everyone's tired. It's the end of the day. It's not ideate. We're not innovative. We've got no gas in the tank. Right.
Yeah. And all you're doing is capturing, because what you need to do is before you act on something, when you act on something, you're committing minutes to it. What makes that problem the one we need to fix over the other 338? Why? Because we can? Because we know we can? Like this is the danger of the human brain, right? The human brain, when it's tired, likes to do either what it likes or what's passive and easy.
Right.
Don't let that brain make decisions of what you're going to do tomorrow and what you're going to fix.
But identify,
absolutely. Because the other problem is that if you wait till the next morning, there's a thing called Ebbinghaus's curve. You will have lost about somewhere between 40 and 60% of what happened yesterday.
Right.
So now I'm just arguing about each other's shitty memories.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. That totally makes sense. Matt, I know culture's critically important to you. What was your aha moment? What was your aha where you said, wow, everyone, I certainly do. Everyone seems to have this aha moment where it's like, wow, this is a very important part of growing this business. This is, maybe we didn't think it was that important. I certainly had my entire, I went on an up and down roller coaster ride of building culture. And And when was your aha moment? Like, holy cow, we better get this right. This is a big part of our strategy.
Yeah. I wish I could say we started with it and we knew it from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
We really didn't. And I will say that as a result, we hired a lot of very good people who didn't work out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so we've been on almost 0% voluntary attrition over the last 2.5 years now. So I'm going to say it was about 3 years ago where we got extremely intentional about building a culture inside Symplicity.
Mm-hmm.
And have you been watching The Last Dance with Michael Jordan?
Watched the whole thing. Loved it.
But what's amazing in that is that the nostalgia of the memories are decidedly different than the creation of those memories.
Right.
And so you got to decide what kind of culture you want to have. Are we a family or are we a high-performing team?
Right.
Which one are we?
Mm-hmm.
And we have oscillated between those two cultures. We've settled into where we want to be a longer term business that is focused more on being a family than
a high performer,
than an organization that's going to build the bulls over and over and over again.
And why choose that strategy?
Well, I think you see what happens when you try to build the bulls. You have moments of greatness that can last for a period of time, but the combustion you create within that vortex is not sustainable over the long term.
You hear that at Amazon, right? You hear people say, I'm pulling my hair, I can't deal with it. And others like, this is what we signed up for. This is it. We are in the pressure cooker and that's the culture,
Exactly. And what you'll see is some people will thrive in that. But I also am not sure that as humans, it's healthy for us to be in that forever. I don't mind experiencing it, but and this goes against high performance, which is, we're fighting with this now, but we've decided that we're going to move to whole person HR, that we aren't just looking at your professional side, that we understand there are different points in your life. I mean, Ron, you just had your second child. I've got a young child. I mean, when my child came along, the professional burner had to be turned down for a bit.
Right. That's right.
And the personal one had to go up. So are you going to be an organization that decides they're going to take that into consideration? Or are you going to be a pressure cooker where performance at all costs is what you want?
What did you call that, Matt? Whole HR? I love that.
Whole person HR.
Right. So as in, it's not just about you at work. It's about you at home, you as a partner, you as a community leader. I love that.
It's about you as a person, right? And Ron, we would know the models from EO, but really, that we work in mental models for organizations. My work with EO and, listening to, in particular, Warren Rustin talk about North Star, and then taking on the Japanese model of Ikagi and saying, what is that for you? And then looking at the 4 perspectives of life when it comes to friend, family, and relationships, personal, professional, and community. And what is that for you? And we've done that with almost all of our people now and said, you can share as much as you want with us. We can't force you to share, but the more you share, the more supportive we can be.
Right.
Right. And so we've had people who have,
we're back to intention, right?
Yeah, exactly. And, we've decided that we want to be a long-term business, which, requires us to be, what's the trick to long-term relationships, right? You actively have to forget and you actively have to forgive.
Yeah.
Because you're going to get to know people on a level that their only thing they can do is fail. So either you treat failure with a certain empathy that we can get back up and with that growth mindset, or you decide to judge in moments of failure.
So that must have been a tough mental pivot for you. That was probably like, let's go to, okay, hold on a sec here,
Yeah, it is. And, I've tried to I've had to move from how fast do I want to go to how fast can we go?
And, let me go there for a sec. So how do you handle failure when it goes too far and you're taking this family approach, because you've got compassion, empathy, you're worrying about me as a whole, and my home life for 6 months has dragged down my productivity. How do you deal with that?
I don't know that there is one sentence answer that satisfies this. I think every situation is different,
right?
And you have to decide whether you're gonna rule by sort of policies or whether you're gonna rule with sort of empathy and situational understanding.
Right.
And so, what does at home not going well mean? Does it mean that I'm going through a divorce? Does it mean that I'm mentally in the dump? What does that mean? And
right.
then, unfortunately, once you decide on whole person HR, you have to know more about people than you probably want to be honest.
Yep.
And then you have to be empathetic to it, and you can't bring that up and use it in a nefarious or a negative way. Now, you still have to get the output. So there's the fine balance as a leader. So how do we as a team get an output and hold space for us as individuals to, have burners that are increasingly or decreasingly available on a professional level? Aren't we going through it right now with this?
Totally.
I mean, I hear my daughter on the other side of the door here, and I didn't lock it. She could very well walk in here in the next 2 minutes, and that wasn't a problem 12 weeks ago.
Right. Yeah, you're totally right.
Right.
I was curious, what your challenges today. I was talking to someone the other day, and they asked me this question. I said, look, for us, one of my challenges, cultural challenges, was that I, as I'm building new organizations now, that I don't act as the culture police, because you go through this stage where, as founder and CEO, these values really came from me. I'm the culture police, and people would say, oh, so-and-so over there is misaligned. Here's what I've seen. So they come and identify things. And I've really tried to make the transition to say, everyone has to play a part here. We can't scale this if I'm the culture police officer. So we've been moving through that. What is your challenge with Symplicity? What are the things that you're thinking about that you need to work on from a culture perspective?
That's a great question, because as we move from an organizational design firm that you sort of hire to an equity engine, which is really the transition we're making, right? We have equity interests in sign company, a biotech company, an engineering firm, and increasingly we're taking majority control or full control on these organizations. And so we're not only driving a culture at Symplicity, but we're also having to meet other cultures where they are and build those ones. So the biggest problem that I have encountered at Symplicity is when we want more for a client than a client wants for themselves.
Interesting.
And we have to deal with that gap in cultural desires. Like, Jesus, it's hard, right? And then probably the other biggest problem we faced for our eternity at Symplicity is we've actually built processes for other companies that are better than our processes.
Right.
And so how do you live with that binary of, geez, couldn't we just have that for us? It's like, yeah, but we couldn't just work on us constantly. We do have to bring revenue in.
Yeah.
That is it's really hard for individual people on the team to build a kick-ass HR process for a company and then come back to ours and it's not as mature or as good.
Right.
And they have to live in that, and we have to live in that, right? And that's good and could be better world. But it's not easy to get over, especially when you're first with Symplicity. Because we know how to help people see what could be. It doesn't mean we are all of that internally. We have our own struggles. We have our own processes to fix.
And look, I want to finish with, because you talked about equity stake, and I know you've done some acquisitions too. You have, set values. This company may or may not. It certainly has a culture, whether identified or not. What do? Do they adapt your values because you've got majority? How do you deal with that?
So we have a certain number of non-negotiables, and normally we will, if we're going into partnership with the previous owners, we will do an engagement beforehand, because you don't learn about people's values by what they say. You learn about them by what they do. And so, over a 3 to 6 to 12-month engagement, we'll learn about them. If we're buying the company, then we do a very robust due diligence beforehand. Most due diligence is involved a financial due diligence. Some good ones also look at a customer Rolodex. We will go a step deeper and look at process capability, and then look at the HR practices, and then look at the leadership capability.
And the cultural foundation, what is right?
Exactly. And we will then ensure that and we've only had to have a few exits. I do believe that you give people the opportunity to come around to this. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're not familiar with the story of Toyota taking over the NUMMI plant, they basically took one of the worst performing plants for another auto dealership and turned it into the highest performing Toyota plant with only 2 people leaving.
I was just going to ask that question. Only 2 leaving. So what was the secret sauce there?
Just a new culture, opportunities. I mean, normally when we help transform organizations, you get that 15-year grizzled vet. And normally the answer isn't, I'm not doing it that way. Normally the thing is, I've been trying to get someone to listen to me for 10 years.
Right.
That's normally what you hear.
They're disgruntled about change they couldn't implement. You hear that from government employees all the time. Right.
So after you get over the general fear of a new owner, you generally get some excitement if you do a couple of engagements early where you just really authentically listen. And I told them early on, I said, listen, when we bought the sign company, I said, folks, I'm going to show you a picture of my grandfather, and here's his sign, and here's how proud he is to have that sign.
Right.
I didn't become the majority shareholder of this sign company so that I could come in and tell you how to make signs. I don't know how to make signs. I just know what a great sign can do for a customer and what it did for my grandfather.
Great story.
Right. And so with you, I want to build this. And so that disarms sort of this, who's this coconut who's going to tell me something?
It's back to intention.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I do not want to be building signs. I'd be no good at that.
You're
right. But I do love the sign company and the sign business.
Great, Matt. Look, I want to thank you for your time and thank you for everything you and the organization does for the entrepreneur community. I think everybody is so appreciative of the time you guys put in and the effort from not just you, but your entire team. So
appreciate it, Ron.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Been a blast, and we'll be in touch.
Awesome. Thanks, Ron. See ya.
For more information on Matt Symes and everything related to scaling culture, please see the links in the show description. We'll be back next week with another incredible guest.